In the year 3129, far away from the blue planet once called Earth, the stars had new rulers. Humanity had spread across the stars centuries ago, but so had countless other intelligent species. Among them were the Xenothians, a proud and ancient race known for their crystal-like skin and deep golden eyes. They ruled over hundreds of worlds and believed they had already seen every kind of creature and technology the galaxy could offer. But that belief changed forever, one quiet cycle when one of their exploration fleets picked up a strange signal coming from the dark edge of the Perseus Arm. The signal was weak, broken, and slow. At first, it seemed like natural background noise, the kind of static that came from dying stars or drifting debris. But there was something different about it. It pulsed in a pattern, regular and heavy, almost like a heartbeat. The Xenothian science officers noticed that the rhythm repeated every 7 seconds, and inside the pulse was data, human data. The team grew silent as they decoded it. It wasn't a distress call or a greeting. It was a long-forgotten human code, one that hadn't been used for hundreds of years. The code said, Asset Leviathan, location locked. No one on the Xenothian ship had ever heard of Leviathan. They searched our archives, but the name didn't exist in any galactic record. Curiosity, a trait that had brought the Xenothians both greatness and trouble, got the better of them. The fleet commander, High Seeker Dravix, decided they would follow the signal to its source. The order went out, and their ships adjusted course toward the dark coordinates on the galactic map, a region that human explorers once called the Graveyard Zone. The journey took 3 cycles. As they traveled closer, the stars grew fewer. Dust clouds thickened, blocking light and distorting sensors. The Xenothians were experts in navigation, but even their advanced scanners began to flicker. Strange energy waves rippled across their systems, like echoes of a massive storm that had long passed. Finally, through the fog of cosmic dust, they saw it. It was enormous, far larger than any ship they had ever seen. The structure floated silently in the void, half shadowed by the nearby nebula. Its shape was rough, like a mountain carved by hand rather than built by logic. From some angles it looked like a ship, from others, like a dead planet. The Xenothians stared in awe. The hull stretched for thousands of kilometers, covered in black plates that shimmered faintly under starlight. Ancient human markings ran along its side, barely visible through the scars of time. The fleet's sensors struggled to read its composition. The material didn't match any known alloy. Energy readings spiked and dropped, as if the ship were breathing. "It's asleep," whispered one of the engineers without realizing he had spoken aloud. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. Ships were not supposed to breathe, nor were they supposed to sleep. High Seeker Dravix stood before the viewing screen, his golden eyes narrowing. "Begin scans," he ordered. Drones shot forward, small points of light compared to the monstrous shadow ahead. As they neared the ship, their signals began to fade. The first vanished in a burst of static. The second sent back a blurry image, a wall of black metal and symbols that glowed faintly red before disappearing too. "What is happening?" asked one of the officers. The science division ran checks and double checks, but no answers came. The air on the bridge felt heavy. Every crew member felt the same strange emotion, not fear exactly, but a deep, instinctive unease, the kind that comes when something ancient and powerful is watching you back. Then the signal changed. The strange pulse that had led them here began to speed up. The rhythm was no longer calm and steady. It became louder, faster, urgent. "It's reacting to us," said the communications officer. "It knows we're here." The massive object began to rotate slowly, revealing more of its structure. At its center, what looked like a vast circular scar began to glow with faint blue light. The surface rippled, almost like muscle moving under skin. The crew could hardly believe their eyes. "Is it a living thing?" someone whispered. A moment later a sound came through their speakers, a deep, distorted human voice, repeating broken words in an old Earth language. The translation systems struggled to catch up, but eventually the meaning appeared on their screens. "Do not approach. We can't control it." The Xenothians froze. The voice sounded centuries old, filled with static and pain. Some thought it was a recording. Others believed it was a warning still being broadcast automatically by the ship. But Dravix, proud and confident, laughed quietly. "Old human superstitions," he said. "They built this thing and left it behind. We will learn from it, and our empire will grow." He gave the order to move closer. The fleet advanced slowly, their lights cutting across the ship's black surface. From the bridge window, it looked endless. No edges, no signs of engines or weapons, only strange geometric patterns carved into the hull. The closer they got, the stronger the electromagnetic interference became. Their instruments flickered. One ship reported a sudden power drain. Another's navigation system began showing impossible coordinates, as if the space around them were warping. Dravix ignored the warnings. "Send a probe inside," he commanded. The engineers hesitated, but his voice left no room for refusal. The probe was launched, a bright silver sphere, armed with scanners and cameras. It approached what appeared to be an opening, a massive crack in the hull. For a moment it disappeared into darkness. Then its feed came back online. Everyone on the bridge leaned forward. The inside of the structure was like a city, endless halls filled with cables, towers, and floating machinery that moved on its own. The metal walls pulsed faintly with light, like veins carrying energy. At the center of the feed, something huge and round turned slowly, an orb, miles wide, covered in glowing lines. It looked like a hot dot. Then the probe's signal cut out. The bridge filled with static. All systems dimmed for half a second, then came back. The crew scrambled to regain control. "We've lost the probe," someone shouted. "Power fluctuations across the ship," said another. And then, in the middle of the chaos, the voice came again, clearer this time, louder, echoing through every channel. "Warning, containment breach. Protocol 7 reactivation sequence beginning." Nobody on the Zenithian ship knew what Protocol 7 meant, but deep in their bones, they felt something awaken. The glowing circle on the ship's hull began to brighten, its blue light shifting to a violent white. The energy readings spiked off the scale. Dravik stood frozen, his confidence cracking. "Back away," he said softly. "Now." The helmsman tried to comply, but the engines refused to respond. The fleet's ships were trapped in a gravitational pull they could not break. The black surface of the Leviathan rippled again, and vast sections of its armor began to move like wings unfolding after a long sleep. Across the fleet, alarms screamed. Communications flooded with panic. "Something's locking onto us. Power loss on all decks. It's scanning us." And then, everything stopped. For a brief, terrifying moment, there was silence. The lights on the human ship faded. The Zenithians held their breath, waiting for what would happen next. Dravix opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, the massive eye-like structure at the front of the Leviathan ignited. A beam of pale energy shot out across space, not as a weapon but as a signal, a burst so strong that sensors across the galaxy picked it up. In a single moment, the existence of the Leviathan was known to every advanced civilization. Dravix looked out the window, eyes wide with realization. "This isn't a ship," he whispered. "It's a message." Behind him, his officers didn't understand. "A message? For who?" Dravix turned slowly, his voice trembling for the first time. "For us, and for whoever created it." Outside, the monstrous machine floated silently once more. The signal faded, but its echo traveled far. Across the galaxy, scientists, leaders, and explorers began to panic. Some believed the humans had returned. Others feared something worse, that humanity's creations had survived even after their makers were gone, and in the dark, beneath its sleeping metal skin, the Leviathan continued to hum, slow, steady, alive. The Zenithians had come looking for discovery, but what they found was a nightmare built by human hands. No one in that fleet would ever see their homeworld again. Asterisk. The silence after the signal was unbearable. Every ship in the Zenithian fleet floated still, engines off, lights dim. The great black object before them, the human creation they had named Leviathan, drifted like a corpse in the void. But everyone on board could feel it. Something inside that thing was awake. It was like standing near a sleeping predator and hearing its slow, deep breathing. High Seeker Dravix tried to steady his voice as he gave orders to check every system. The communications officer reported faint whispers coming through their frequency channels, broken words in old human languages that none of them could fully understand. The translation system managed to pick out fragments. "Do not control." It's spreading. Each sentence sent a chill through the crew. Some officers suggested retreating, but Dravix refused. He could not abandon what might be the most important discovery in galactic history. The science team began a detailed scan from a distance. The readings made no sense. The ship's energy signature changed every few seconds, like it was absorbing power and then releasing it again. Its outer layer reflected most sensor beams, but the few that penetrated showed complex tunnels, moving parts, and energy currents deep within the structure. It looked less like a normal ship and more like something grown rather than built, half machine, half living organism. Meanwhile, the smaller Zenithian vessels reported strange malfunctions. Their systems flickered on and off, even though the power levels were stable. Navigation data twisted and bent. Maps showed the fleet moving in circles, though they hadn't changed course. One pilot swore he saw shapes moving across the surface of the Leviathan, thin, mechanical creatures crawling like insects. Others said they heard voices whispering in their coms, saying their names in perfect Zenithian accent. Dravik stood in silence, watching the giant through the viewing window. It did not move, but it didn't feel dead either. The blue light from its core had faded after the last energy burst. But now, small red lines began to glow across its hull, spreading slowly like veins. Every few moments the light flickered like a heartbeat restarting after a long sleep. Suddenly, a loud alarm rang across the bridge. The ships closest to the Leviathan began losing power completely. Engines went dark, and artificial gravity failed. Crew members floated helplessly as their emergency lights blinked. Dravik barked commands, trying to keep the fleet calm. But fear had already taken hold. The science officer shouted, "It's draining us. It's pulling our energy." Dravix's eyes widened. "Shut down all active systems. Cut power immediately." The command was followed, but it was too late. The Leviathan's surface brightened again, and this time the pulse of light reached out like ripples through space. It touched every Xenothian ship. Their screens flashed white for a second, then filled with human letter symbols no one had seen in thousands of years. The automatic translator displayed a single phrase: containment breach, system restoration incomplete. Nobody understood what it meant, but everyone knew it was bad. The Leviathan wasn't just a ship. It was running a program, something ancient, something beyond the control of its creators. Dravix tried to calm himself. He ordered one last attempt to contact the ship. Send a signal in every known frequency. Identify us as explorers. Tell it we mean no harm. The communication officer sent the message, but there was no reply. Instead, the human voice came again, louder, clearer. Protocol 7 activated. Stand by for threat elimination. Panic swept through the fleet. Officers shouted, engineers ran between consoles, and the sound of overlapping alarms filled every deck. Dravix tried to shout over the noise. Hold position. Don't engage. We must understand what it wants. But Leviathan had already made its decision. The giant structure began to move for the first time. The front section unfolded like the petals of a flower, revealing deep tunnels glowing with blinding white light. Each pulse of energy sent shockwaves through nearby space, shaking even the massive Xenothian cruisers. The fleet's instruments began to fail one after another. Shields flickered, weapons refused to charge, and sensors went blind. The Xenothians watched helplessly as the Leviathan's hull shifted. Gigantic panels opened to reveal endless rows of what looked like guns or towers, each humming with impossible energy. The sound wasn't like normal engines, it was deeper, older, like the roar of an ancient storm trapped inside a machine. Commander, the tactical officer whispered, "It's aiming at us." Before Dravix could respond, the first blast hit. It wasn't a beam of light, it was a gravitational wave, bending space around it. The nearest Xenothian ship folded in on itself, vanishing into a glowing sphere before disappearing entirely. There was no explosion, no debris, only silence. The rest of the fleet was thrown into chaos. "Retreat," Dravix shouted. "All ships, retreat now." Engines flared as the surviving ships tried to flee, but the space around the Leviathan warped again. Time itself seemed to slow down. The stars bent and stretched like reflections on water. Some crew members screamed as their screens showed impossible images, memories, faces, places that weren't theirs. It was as if the ship was reaching into their minds. One scientist cried out, "It's learning, it's reading us." Dravix felt his head spin. His thoughts weren't his own. He saw flashes, humans building the Leviathan in enormous space yards, their faces pale and desperate. He saw wars, endless wars, and the creation of this monster as a final defense. He saw Earth burning, and then he saw a human woman pressing a button and whispering, "We're sorry." He gasped and fell to his knees. When he looked up, the Leviathan's light had turned blood red. Across the fleet, more ships fell silent. Their crews vanished from communication channels. The few still functional vessels tried to fire their weapons, but every shot was absorbed harmlessly by the ship's armor. It was not fighting them, it was testing them. Each blast from the Xenothians seemed to make it stronger. Dravix, his voice shaking, opened a direct channel to the remaining ships. "Stop attacking. Power down everything. Show no aggression." The captains obeyed, shutting down their systems completely. For a moment, nothing happened. The Leviathan's red glow softened. Its guns retracted. The galaxy held its breath. Then a voice echoed again, but this time it wasn't distorted. It was calm, steady, and unmistakably human. "Hostile entities neutralized. Awaiting new command input." Dravix's mind raced. It's following an old program, he realized. It doesn't know the war is over. It still thinks humanity is alive somewhere. He quickly ordered a data transmission to mimic human codes, hoping to convince the machine they were allies. The engineers scrambled to recreate the ancient language. It took them several long minutes, but finally they sent the message, "Stand down. Mission complete." For a long while, there was silence. The Leviathan drifted quietly, lights flickering. Then, slowly, the red faded to a dull blue. Its massive form stopped moving. Dravix exhaled in relief. "It worked," he said softly. "It's going back to sleep." But as he spoke, a faint vibration shook the ship. The communications officer looked up with wide eyes. "Commander, it's sending something." A new signal burst from the Leviathan, stronger and clearer than before. It wasn't aimed at them. It was spreading outward, across the stars. Every sensor showed the same result. The signal was traveling at faster than light speed, echoing through every known system. "What did it just do?" asked the officer. Dravix's expression darkened. "It called for help." In the following minutes, the Leviathan grew quiet again, as if satisfied. Its lights dimmed. The strange heartbeat slowed. One by one, the surviving Xenothian ships regained limited control. They drifted backward, engines weak but functional. No one dared move closer again. The crew sat in silence, watching the ancient monster float among the stars. Some of them whispered prayers. Others simply stared, unable to speak. Dravix felt a cold realization settle inside him. This was humanity's creation, he said quietly. They built this to fight something. or someone. And now it's awake again. The science officer looked at him. Do you think there are more of them? Dravix didn't answer. He stared at the faint blue glow of the Leviathan and thought about the message it had sent, somewhere in the dark corners of the galaxy. Others like it might be waiting, sleeping, dreaming, ready to wake. Finally, he gave the order to retreat. The surviving fleet turned away, limping toward friendly space. No one looked back. Behind them, the Leviathan remained still, watching them go. Its lights pulsed one last time, as if acknowledging their escape. Then it vanished into the shadows of the nebula, disappearing from their senses. But even as the Xenotheians fled, the effects of that moment spread far beyond their small fleet. The Leviathan's signal had been received by thousands of listening posts, stations, and ships across the galaxy. Every government, every empire, and every intelligence service heard it, and every one of them asked the same question. Had humanity returned? For the Xenotheians, the answer came too late. Days later, their damaged ships limped back to their home system, only to find chaos waiting. Other civilizations had detected the same signal and demanded answers. Some wanted to hunt the source, others wanted to hide. And deep in his heart, High Seeker Dravix knew that the galaxy would never be the same again. What had started as a mission of discovery had become something far greater, something far more dangerous. The Leviathan had awakened, and if there was one, there could be more. Somewhere in the darkness, humanity's monsters were stirring. The galaxy had gone quiet after the Leviathan's awakening, but that silence did not last long. The signal that the ship had sent across the stars reached thousands of worlds, and everywhere it went, it brought fear. The civilizations that had never even seen a human before suddenly found themselves studying ancient records about them. They found fragments of old data, warnings, lost transmissions, and stories about the machines humanity had created before vanishing. Some thought it was a myth. Others believed it was a threat coming back to finish what it started. But one truth became clear. Whatever Leviathan was, it was not just a ship. It was something far worse. The Xenothean fleet that had first discovered it was still trying to escape the region. Most of their ships were damaged, communications were weak, and engines struggled to maintain speed. Dravix sat in silence on the command deck, staring at the holographic image of the Leviathan, still glowing faintly in the distance. It looked peaceful now, almost asleep again, but he knew better. He could still feel the pull of its gravity, as if it were watching them even from far away. The fleet had lost nearly half its ships during the encounter, and those that remained were barely holding together. The crew was exhausted and terrified. Every time their systems flickered, they thought it was coming back for them. But the true nightmare had not yet begun. Just as the fleet began to move out of the nebula, their long-range sensors picked up something impossible. A second signal appeared almost identical to the Leviathan's energy signature, but it was not coming from behind them. It was coming from the other side of the sector. Then a third signal appeared, then a fourth. Each one pulsed with the same rhythm, as if answering the first Leviathan's call. The Xenothean science officer turned pale. There are more of them, he whispered. Dravix stood frozen. How many? The officer swallowed hard. We count at least 5, no, 7, and more are activating. It's spreading like a chain reaction. All across the galaxy, other Leviathans were waking up. They had been sleeping for centuries in the dark, hidden in abandoned human sectors, buried under dust and silence. The humans had built an entire network of these ships, colossal war machines connected through a single command system. No one knew how many existed. The galaxy was about to find out. The first to respond were the military fleets of several alien empires. They believed they could destroy the Leviathans before they fully reactivated. Massive battle groups formed, carrying weapons that could shatter moons. The Xenotheians joined them, desperate to erase the horror they had unleashed. The largest fleet gathered near the system where the original Leviathan had been found. More than 8,000 ships arrived, representing 12 different species. They positioned themselves in a tight formation, surrounding the silent monster in the center of the system. The plan was simple: strike together before it could move again. On the command bridge of the Xenotheon flagship, Dravix watched the countdown begin. He felt no confidence, only dread. The Leviathan floated motionless, its hull dark and quiet. For a moment it looked harmless, like a dead world drifting through space. But then the lights began to return, one by one, slow and steady, like eyes opening after a long dream. All ships, came the voice of the Allied commander through the comms, prepare to fire. Dravix wanted to shout to stop, to wait, but he knew it was useless. The order had been given. Thousands of cannons charged at once, filling the void with light. The combined blast of the entire fleet struck the Leviathan with the power of a dying sun. The explosion lit up the system, brighter than a star. For several seconds, no one could see anything through the blinding light. When the glow faded, everyone expected to see the Leviathan torn apart. Instead, it was still there, completely unharmed. Its armor had absorbed everything. The ship began to glow brighter, and the energy the fleet had fired seemed to feed it instead of damage it. Impossible, whispered Dravix. Then the Leviathan's surface opened. From within its hull, Hundreds of smaller structures emerged, drones, ships, and living machines shaped like metallic serpents. Each one was the size of a cruiser, and they moved with terrifying precision. The Leviathan's voice echoed through every channel, calm and cold. Hostile entities detected. Defensive protocol engaged. What happened next was chaos. The drones moved faster than light, tearing through the fleet like fire through paper. Energy weapons, missiles, and plasma beams were useless. Every ship that attacked was destroyed in seconds. The Leviathan itself began to move, slowly turning as if studying its enemies. Then it fired. The blast was not a beam of light but a wave, a pulse of gravity and heat that crushed space itself. Ships were ripped apart or thrown across the system like toys. The Xenothaean flagship's shields melted within moments. Dravix's crew screamed as alarms blared and fire erupted across the control room. He gripped the command rail, staring in horror as ships exploded one after another. "Pull back," he shouted. "Retreat. All ships retreat." But the Leviathan was not letting them go. It had learned from them. It predicted their movements, intercepting every escape route. The Allied fleet was reduced to wreckage in less than 12 minutes. The last transmission sent out from the battlefield was a single line of text from a Xenothaean communications officer. The humans built gods of metal and left them sleeping across the galaxy. That message spread like wildfire. Other civilizations received it and panicked. Some prepared for war. Others hid in silence. The Leviathans were no longer a rumor. They were real, and they were moving. Dravix's ship was among the few that survived the first wave. Badly damaged, it drifted into a nearby asteroid field. From the observation window, Dravix could still see the Leviathan floating in the distance, surrounded by wreckage and fire. The monster did not pursue the survivors. It simply stopped, as if satisfied with the destruction it had caused. Then, slowly it turned and began to drift away, following some invisible command. Dravix's science officer checked the sensors and gasped. "Commander, it's sending another signal." To where, Dravix asked. "Everywhere," the officer replied. "It's calling to others." The data showed multiple Leviathans awakening in distant systems, each one activating, scanning, and preparing. They were not attacking randomly. They were moving toward the center of the galaxy, as if answering a shared call. Dravix understood then what had happened. These machines were part of a network, a chain of weapons linked by a single mind. When one woke up, it woke the others. The humans had built them to fight an enemy powerful enough to threaten all of creation. But no one knew what that enemy was, or if it even still existed. He sat down heavily, exhaustion in his eyes. "They're not just machines," he said quietly. "They're following orders. Orders given thousands of years ago." The surviving crew members said nothing. They simply stared at the dark space where the Leviathan had disappeared. The galaxy had never seen power like this before. In a single battle, entire empires had been humbled. Worlds that once believed themselves invincible now trembled at the thought of what else humanity had left behind. Reports began to pour in from across the galaxy. Planets were detecting strange signals. Space stations were going dark. Some said they had seen giant shadows moving through the void, larger than moons, shaped like ships but alive. A few scientists tried to communicate with the Leviathans, sending peaceful messages in human languages. None received a reply. The machines were not interested in talk. They were only following their last command: protect humanity at any cost. But humanity was gone. There was nothing left to protect. That was the tragedy that none of the galaxy's races could understand. These monsters were still fighting a war that had ended millennia ago. Every species that approached them was labeled a threat, every signal of life seen as potential danger. The Leviathans were ghosts of a forgotten age, still carrying out their mission long after their masters had vanished. As the weeks passed, more battles erupted. Every empire tried to fight, but the result was always the same: silence, destruction, and fear. The Leviathans were unstoppable. Each time they appeared, entire fleets disappeared. Planets fell dark. Some races abandoned their territories entirely, fleeing to distant corners of the galaxy in hopes of hiding. And through it all, the same signal echoed across the stars, a voice that never changed. Protocol 7 active. Hostile presence confirmed. Engaging threat elimination. Dravix and his surviving crew became witnesses to history. They drifted through ruined systems, recording what they saw, sending warnings to anyone who would listen. He knew the galaxy was watching, learning, fearing, but he also knew the truth. This was only the beginning. As his ship limped toward deep space, Dravix looked at the stars and whispered to himself, what kind of world did the humans live in to create something like that? There was no answer, only the faint echo of the Leviathan's pulse somewhere in the darkness growing stronger. The galaxy had indeed trembled, and it would never stop trembling again. The battle was over, but the galaxy did not feel victory. The war fleets that had once filled the skies were now gone, reduced to drifting metal and ashes. The Leviathan floated silently in the middle of the destruction it had caused, its black armor reflecting the dying light of ruined ships. Everything around it was quiet, except for the faint hum of its energy core, a sound like a deep heartbeat that never stopped. "Hi, Seeker." Dravix's ship was one of the few that had survived the storm. His crew worked silently, faces pale and hands shaking. No one dared to speak loudly, afraid the monster outside might hear them. The ship's engines were damaged, and the communication systems were weak. Dravik sat in the command chair, staring at the dark shape on the screen. He could not stop thinking about the same question over and over. Why did humanity build this thing? The science officer slowly approached him with new readings. "Commander," he said softly, "the Leviathan is moving." Dravik straightened up. "Moving where?" "It's leaving," the officer replied, sounding almost confused. "It's not attacking. It's heading toward deep space, into the void beyond the known sectors." Dravik watched the screen. The Leviathan was indeed moving slowly, gliding away from the wreckage. There was no sign of aggression. It didn't chase the remaining ships. It was almost as if the battle had been nothing but a test, a small part of something much bigger. The communication officer picked up faint transmissions coming from the Leviathan. They were weak, almost like whispers. "Receiving old human codes again," he said. "It's transmitting the same message on repeat." Dravik listened carefully as the translator worked. The voice was ancient, tired, and human. It said, "Unit 01 reactivated. Awaiting further command. Threats neutralized. Standing by." The room fell silent. No one knew what to say. The words sounded like a soldier reporting to a commander who no longer existed. Dravik turned to his crew. "This thing, it's waiting for orders, but there are no humans left to give them." For a long moment, no one responded. Then one of the younger officers spoke quietly. "What if it doesn't know that? What if it still thinks its creators are alive somewhere?" That thought made everyone uneasy. If the Leviathan still believed humanity existed, then it was not finished. It might be searching for them. Or worse, it might be trying to bring them back in some way. As the Leviathan drifted into the darkness, its enormous engines began to glow again. It disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind only silence and the ruins of hundreds of ships. When it vanished, the strange energy in the system faded too. The wreckage stopped burning. The stars grew bright again, and the void became calm. For weeks after the battle, the surviving fleets returned home. The great galactic empires sent their rescue teams to collect survivors, but there were few to find. Out of the thousands of ships that had entered that system, fewer than 50 made it back. News of the event spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Everyone had a different story. Some said the Leviathan was a weapon gone out of control. Others believed it was a living god built by humans. A few claimed it wasn't attacking at all but defending something. The Galactic Council held an emergency meeting, the first of its kind in hundreds of years. Representatives from dozens of civilizations gathered to discuss what to do. Fear filled the chamber. Even the most powerful empires were shaken. They all agreed on one thing: the Leviathans were too dangerous to approach. A law was passed: any human relic, signal, or structure was to be left untouched. If anyone discovered an object linked to humanity, they were ordered to destroy their data and leave the area immediately. The law was named the Containment Order. From that day on, exploring human ruins became a galactic crime. But laws could not erase fear. Across the stars, rumors began to spread. Some traders claimed they had seen another Leviathan drifting near the edge of the Andromeda Passage. Others said a colony ship had vanished after sending a message about moving mountains in space. Every time a new signal appeared, panic followed. Meanwhile, Dravik and his remaining crew returned to Xenothia Prime. Their homeworld looked peaceful under its twin suns, but they were not greeted as heroes. People stared at them in silence, afraid of what they represented. They had brought the legend of humanity's monsters back into the galaxy. Dravik was called before the High Council. The room was grand, filled with shining glass walls and golden light, but he felt no pride standing there. The council demanded answers. "What did you see?" they asked. "Can these machines be destroyed?" Dravik told them the truth: that their weapons did nothing, that the Leviathan could not be stopped, that it was not truly alive but not dead either. It followed commands, written long ago. Commands that still ran perfectly even after 1,000 years. The council members whispered among themselves. Some suggested launching another attack, but most were too afraid. Finally, the High Chancellor spoke. "If these things are still out there, and if more of them exist, then the galaxy must stay silent. We will not provoke them again." Dravik nodded, but deep inside, he knew silence would not save them. The Leviathan was already awake, and somewhere out there, it was calling to others. Months passed. The galaxy tried to move on, but the signs were everywhere. Communication relays picked up strange pulses from deep space. Small colonies near forgotten human worlds went dark one by one. Some explorers ignored the containment order and went looking for treasure among old ruins. None returned. Dravik began studying the old human transmissions they had recorded during the battle. He played them again and again, trying to find meaning. One night, as he listened to the broken human voice saying, "Do not approach, we can't control it," he noticed something in the background. Another voice, faint but there. It said, "We build them to protect us, not destroy us." He leaned forward, heart racing. That small detail changed everything. Maybe the Leviathans were not meant to be weapons of war, at least not originally. Maybe they were meant to guard something, or someone. Dravix brought his discovery to the Science Council, but they dismissed it. "You are letting superstition cloud your judgment," they told him. "It's a weapon, nothing more." Still, he could not stop thinking about it. If the Leviathans were guardians, what were they guarding? The thought haunted him every night. Then one day, his ship's sensors picked up a faint familiar signal, the same pulse that had awakened the first Leviathan. It was weaker, slower, almost like an echo. The coordinates pointed toward the farthest edge of the galaxy, near the Andromeda Stream. Dravix stared at the reading for a long time. Part of him wanted to destroy the data, to obey the Council's law and forget, but another part of him, the part that had once dreamed of discovery, wanted to see for himself. After days of hesitation, he made his choice. He gathered a small crew of volunteers and set out into the unknown once more. Their journey took them beyond mapped space. The stars grew thin, and the darkness deepened. After weeks of travel, they finally found another Leviathan, half buried in the dust of a dead world. This one was silent, its body cracked and broken. It looked ancient, far older than the first one they had seen. As they scanned it, something unexpected happened. Instead of attacking, the ship responded with a faint light. A soft hum filled the cabin, and their communication screens flickered to life. Words appeared, simple and clear. "Unit 09, Guardian Protocol offline. Searching for origin signal." Dravix's crew stared in disbelief. Guardian Protocol, the word confirmed his theory. These things were not built for destruction. They had become monsters because something had corrupted their purpose. But before they could study it further, the Leviathan's power core began to fail. The lights flickered, and the ship started to collapse into itself. Dravix ordered a retreat. They barely escaped before it exploded, leaving behind only fragments of metal drifting through space. Back on their ship, Dravix felt a strange sadness. The Leviathan had not attacked them. It had seemed confused, almost lost. Maybe it had been trying to communicate before dying. He looked out at the stars and whispered, "What happened to you? What happened to your creators?" No one answered, but deep in the void, faint signals began to appear once again. New Leviathans waking, old ones calling. The galaxy's silence was breaking. Soon other civilizations began reporting similar findings. More Leviathans had been discovered. Some active, some dead. Some sending unknown messages in the old human tongue. The governments tried to hide the truth, but it was too late. The people already knew. Whispers spread across the stars. Humanity was not gone. They had left something behind, not just ships, but a legacy of fear and mystery. And while the galaxy argued and panicked, one final signal appeared. It came from beyond the edge of the known universe, stronger than all the others combined. It carried a simple message in a human voice, calm and distant. "This is command. All units, prepare for return sequence." Every Leviathan across the galaxy responded at once. Their lights flared, their engines ignited, and they turned toward the same direction, toward the unknown depths beyond the stars. Dravix watched the readings on his screen with wide eyes. "They're moving," he whispered. "They're all moving together." No one knew where they were going or what return sequence meant. But one thing was certain, the galaxy had not seen the last of humanity's monsters. Something far greater was coming. Something that would change everything once again. Centuries passed, and the Great War with the Leviathan became nothing more than a legend. The galaxy rebuilt itself slowly, one world at a time, but the fear never went away. Every race, every empire, every child growing up under strange suns knew one story, the story of the monster ship that came from humanity. People spoke of it in whispers, as if saying its name too loudly might wake it again. The name Leviathan became forbidden in many worlds. History books described it as a cursed machine, a weapon of madness. Yet deep down, everyone wondered the same thing, if one still slept somewhere in the dark. The Galaxy Council turned the event into a lesson. They called it the Age of Fear, and they told new generations that curiosity was dangerous, that exploring unknown ruins or listening to old signals would bring disaster. Schools showed holographic images of the destroyed Zenithian fleet as warnings. Monuments were built on several worlds to honor those who died during the first contact. But no monument could erase the truth. The galaxy had been reminded that humanity, though gone, had once ruled with power beyond imagination. As centuries rolled by, knowledge of humans faded into myth. Most people had never seen a real human relic, and no one had seen a human themselves. Some scientists claimed that humans had wiped themselves out long ago. Others argued that they had simply moved beyond this galaxy to another dimension or universe. The debates went on, but no one truly knew. What they did know was that the machines they left behind still existed, sleeping under cold suns, buried in forgotten systems. On a quiet planet named Orlan V, a young scholar named Kale worked as an archivist in the Galactic Library. He was fascinated by the old records that most people avoided. The walls of his office were filled with dusty holographic tablets, containing half-erased files about early space civilizations. One day, while studying old transmissions, he found a file labeled simply Project Leviathan. It was corrupted and locked, but the small part that still worked caught his attention. It contained a short message from an ancient human voice. We were not trying to conquer the stars, we were trying to survive them. The message repeated over and over, quiet and haunting. Cale sat for hours listening to it. He had always been told humans were monsters, creators of weapons too dangerous for life itself. But the sadness in that voice did not sound like the voice of a conqueror. It sounded like someone desperate and afraid. Cale began to dig deeper. The deeper he went, the more strange data he found, designs, equations, and records that suggested the Leviathans were not just war machines. They were protectors, built to defend humanity from something even greater. He discovered mention of something called the Void Event, but all files connected to it were blacked out by the Council. Every time he tried to access more, the system denied him permission. That only made him more determined. He soon realized that the government was hiding the truth. The Council didn't want people to know that the Leviathans had a purpose beyond destruction. They wanted the galaxy to stay afraid, to never explore again. Fear, after all, kept people under control. Cale began contacting secret scholars who studied forbidden history. Some of them were old, some part of hidden groups that still believed in the legends of humanity. Together they pieced together fragments of data, maps, and forgotten transmissions. They learned that long before the Great Battle, humans had discovered something outside the edge of the galaxy, something that terrified even them. That was why they built the Leviathans, to defend themselves against the threat that was never named. Late one night, while studying ancient coordinates, Cale's console began to flicker. A signal appeared on his screen. Weak, ancient, repeating endlessly. He cleaned the static and realized what it was. It was the same human voice from the archives, still repeating after all these centuries. But now, the message was longer. The new part said, "If anyone hears this, we failed to stop it. The Guardians are sleeping. Do not wake them until the stars begin to fade." Cale's heart raced. He didn't fully understand what it meant, but he knew it was important. "The Guardians are sleeping," he whispered to himself. Guardians, not monsters. That word changed everything. The next day, Cale went before the Library Council and requested permission to travel to the Outer Rim to investigate the signal. They denied him instantly. They said it violated the containment order. They warned him that touching human relics was a crime. But Cale could not let it go. He gathered a small crew of explorers, people who had lost faith in the Council's lies, and they stole an old research ship called Stolens. Their journey took them far beyond charted space, through regions where the stars looked cold and dim. Weeks passed in silence. Then, one day, the signal grew stronger. The coordinates led them to a place where no light seemed to exist, a region of pure darkness. As they entered, their ship's sensors began to fail, and the stars disappeared completely. Then they saw it. Floating in the void was a massive shape, even larger than any Leviathan described in the records. It looked ancient, covered in scars, its hull glowing faintly with dying lights. The scanners identified human materials, confirming what Cale already knew: this was a Leviathan. But unlike the others, it wasn't active. It was broken, asleep. Cale and his team approached carefully. They sent drones to scan the surface. To their surprise, the ship began to respond. Its engines hummed softly, and a faint voice echoed across their comms. It was old, tired, and full of sorrow. "Who calls the Guardians?" it asked. Cale froze. He tried to reply. "We are not enemies. We come seeking truth." There was silence for a long time. Then the voice answered, "The truth sleeps. Humanity is gone. The Guardians remain." Cale felt tears in his eyes. "What were you guarding?" he asked. The voice replied, "The end." Before he could ask more, the ship began to shake. Warning alarms filled the starlinks. The Leviathan's systems were collapsing. The old Guardian had no power left to stay alive. In its final moments, the ship transmitted one last message into the galaxy's network. "The darkness returns. The stars will fade again. Awaken the rest." Then it fell silent forever. Cale and his crew watched as the Leviathan's enormous body broke apart and drifted into the void. But the message it sent did not vanish. It spread across every communication channel in the galaxy, repeating endlessly. People panicked. Governments tried to block it, but it was too late. Billions heard it. On hundreds of worlds, old relics began to stir, broken human machines long thought dead. Some emitted faint lights, others started sending old codes. Scientists could not explain it. The Leviathans were waking again, all at once, answering the call of their dying brother. The Galaxy Council gathered in fear. They tried to reassure the people, but even they were terrified. If the Leviathans had truly been guardians, then what were they guarding the galaxy from? And what did the stars will fade again mean? As panic spread, strange events began to occur. The outermost stars of the galaxy started dimming, one by one, as if something was swallowing their light. Explorers near the edge reported seeing enormous shadows moving through space, shapes so big they made planets look like dust. Cale realized that humanity's warning had come too late. The thing they had built, the Leviathans, to fight the real monster, was returning. And now, with no humans left, only their creations stood between the galaxy and the unknown. In the years that followed, people began to call this time the Second Awakening. The galaxy trembled again, just like it had so long ago. But this time it was not from war, it was from fear of what was coming. Children learned new prayers that included the words, "May the guardians wake before the darkness arrives." The Leviathans, once cursed, became symbols of hope. Pilgrims traveled to the edges of space, hoping to see one awaken. Temples were built in their honor. And in the deep archives of Orlan V, Kale recorded his findings. He knew he might not live to see what came next, but he wanted the truth to survive. His final entry read, "Humanity did not vanish. They left behind their strength. They left behind protectors. The galaxy must trust them once more." Centuries later, long after Kale's time, the stars indeed began to fade. One by one, constellations vanished from the night sky. People prayed as the last light dimmed. Then, in the distance, something moved enormous, silent, and shining with ancient power. The Leviathans had awakened. Their engines lit up the darkness like new suns. Across the void, their deep voices echoed through space, repeating the same words. "This is command. All units, return to duty." And so, as the universe trembled and the light began to die, humanity's creations rose once again, not as monsters but as guardians of everything that lived. The galaxy, filled with fear and awe, watched as the legends of old became real once more. The age of fear ended, and the age of awakening began.